We think it's our conscious mind that's driving our reality, but it's our subconscious.
Yeah.
Marc J. Platten has spent decades guiding men through identity, masculinity, and spiritual transformation.
I pulled any resources I could to understand this essence of what it is to be a man. It's a long process. And had I known what I know now, moving from those princely behaviors into really owning my king behavior, taking responsibility as opposed to feeling like I was a victim. Our first 7 years of life is protecting that theta brainwave state, creating our reality to help us navigate the world. So I want the boy to be in there still, but it's time to grow and include that. So I wish I could say that I recognized inside myself that I was being triggered and that I had my own growth opportunity. I didn't.
I want to bring you back to what you said a little bit earlier in your story.
If I'm the same man at 50 that I was at 25, that means there's 25 years of no growth that's happened there. Not only is that a disservice to myself, but it's also a disservice to humanity. There's something wrong with that. I shut down around it. I was like, oh, is this manipulation? They are different men than what I was, than what my father was, and what my grandfather was. The men who haven't gotten that, who are approaching midlife, who are trying to fill that inner hole with stuff, there will come a time you can't put enough stuff in there to fill that hole because...
Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Marc Platten. He is the founder of the Integral Man Institute, and he speaks on not just the emotional journey, but the sacred and spiritual journey that men go through. He pulls from Jungian archetypes, which you know I love talking about. I pulls from mythology, and he really helps guys navigate this complex human existence. Today, we're going to be talking mainly about midlife, about that second half of life. So we're going to talk about all kinds of things, including fatherhood, grandfatherhood, menopause, andropause, a lot of great topics. So Marc, welcome to the show.
I appreciate it, Mark. I do love that we both have the same name, even though it's spelled differently, but it's good to be a Mark.
That's right. You know, loved it. Love the name. Yeah, spelled differently, pronounced the same way. So let's just dive right into your personal story. So what got you interested in doing this type of sacred work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I had to think back through this. I oftentimes go, where did men's work actually come from for me? And it goes back about 25 years now where I was actually started a PhD in men's divinity work. And so I never finished it, but I got involved in it. I'm in Colorado, just like you are, Mark. And I spent a year or so traveling around Colorado, interviewing anybody who I come across was doing men's work, men's ceremonial kind of things. I pulled all the books I could, any resources I could to kind of understand this essence of what it is to be a man and what was calling for from those times men's work. What was it asking of me? And interestingly, in that journey, after attending a bunch of ceremonies, attending a bunch of men's work, what happened was this thing that you would think would be pretty obvious is I had never actually created and led a men's course, a men's program. So I started a men's program and that led into my a gentleman who I eventually became my best friend saying to me, hey, my minister at my church is really wanting to do a men's group. And because the women, it's really the women were going, had a really robust women's group, and they were wanting their men to do some men's work. I said, would you come and talk to the minister and just see if there's something that might come from that? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. So I sat down with the minister and talked with him and said, well, this is what I'm thinking about doing, laying out this 9-month program here. We'll meet every 2 weeks. Do you want to be a part of it or do you want to co-lead? And he's like, oh my God, nobody's ever asked me if I could just participate as a regular person. And that started every 2-week process of meeting with men. And we had about 35 men attending there for a 2-year period. And so I was doing deep men's work, a lot of ceremony, sacred drumming, shamanic journey work, nature, connecting. We did some sweat lodge and other kind of physical for the first 9 months. And then we went into the interior world once I had their trust. And we were looking at where are areas where maybe your lineage, whose shoulders do you stand on? What's the deep inner work that's being asked of you? What are those shadows that keep you from being your greatest self? And then we did several rites, rituals, ceremonies. I'm really versed in a lot of indigenous pathways and shamanic work and so forth with that. So it was very meaningful to do that. And it was at the end of that 2-year period where spirit spoke to me and said, "You're doing great work, Mark, but it's time to lay this work down for right now because you don't have gray hair and your father is still alive." And it was really quite poignant. It's like, okay, I understand that. And I have these, and also I remember it truly is spirit coming in through, however you call it, spirit, sacred, divine, God, whatever terms we use for that, the sacred came into me. And when it comes in those kind of ways, it's like, it's not although sometimes I do debate it, it's like, no, this is foundational to who I am evolving into. And so I put that work down for some time. And now obviously I've got gray, a fair amount of gray. My father passed away 3 years ago, and so I've been doing continual work through that, but not as intense as I'm doing right now again. So about 5 years ago, I picked back up that mantle of men's work and really dove back into creating different courses and programs. I'm leading several other men's groups. And this has led me, interestingly, to this place, as I was mentioning to you before we started this interview process, Mark, of this thing I'm calling the King's Return, which is the midlife process of where men are, because I'm on the back end I moved through menopause and andropause of my wife about a decade ago. It almost took us apart. And if you had said that to me when we first came together, it was like, there's no way something's going to unravel us. So there's nothing that's going to break us from our foundation. And it did, because it's a long process. And had I known what I didn't know now, like be able to have some of the tools that I'm wanting to share in this course coming up in the programs that we're doing, it would have made it a much easier journey. And we could have done it in a sacred way, side by side as partners. Me going from maturing some of my juvenile parts, some of my princely behaviors within myself, so that you look the Jungian archetypes of stuff, moving from those princely behaviors into really owning my king behavior, taking responsibility, standing in my core and foundation and grounding in to be a partner with, as opposed to feeling like I was being attacked or beat up on or made less than, or not in my, in my boy mentality, feeling like I was a victim.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. I definitely want to talk about that transition from adult to elder. I think in men's work, there's so much focus on like boy to man, right? Kind of this initiation, coming of age type of stuff, but not enough focus on adult to elder, which I think is equally important. So I do want to talk about that, but I guess first to make it real for our listeners, can you share some of the conflicts that you and your wife had? Maybe a story or a memory or something that really highlights that, menopause, andropause crisis moment?
The story that my wife and I talk about is that this feeling, like I could see that she was in anguish, that she was in pain, that she was suffering through her process, that the emotions, the amount of emotions were moving through her, unfortunately triggered in me from prior relationships. So I had my first marriage was to a woman who was bipolar, still is bipolar. And the amount of that switching of emotions felt in that relationship manipulative. And she would use those emotions that way. So when my wife, who was very grounded and very anchored and very, a very mature, spiritually grounded person and businesswoman, started having all these emotions, it fed back into it triggered me. And so I shut down around that. I was like, "Oh, is this manipulation?" Because it was fairly soon into our relationship that happened. We got married when we came together when she was 41. We had our child with our youngest child when she was 41. So it's and that trigger the menopause. And we'd only been together for a year and a half at that time. So it triggered menopause, the onset, so perimenopause fairly early on in our relationship. So what I had found was this really strong, grounded business and spiritual woman with deep love and connection and deep access to her emotional field and really caring about my emotional place. All of a sudden, it was like this massive emotion blasted at me that felt an awful lot like this past relationship. So had I known more, had I recognized that triggering in myself, I could have gone, "Hey, That's a trigger. That's past relationship. This is something different that's happening here. Where's my work in this? Instead, what happened for me was, it's like, oh my God, this old relationship playing out again? Is this old? It's like, did I step into this thing again? How did I misstep here? And then it's like, I've got a shield against this. So I create my walls. And anytime you shield part of yourself, especially your heart, you're shielding all of yourself in a particular way. And so that's one way that triggered for me with that, Mark. Another way would be that, like many men, I'm a fixer, and I am the quintessential Renaissance man, knight in shining armor. I can fix anything, heal anything, tackle anything, fight anything if I need to. And so when I saw her oftentimes in these, I could see, I wake up, I intuit very well as well. So I can sense that something's off. I think we all have that. And so I want to fix, I want to help, I wanted to provide, some solutions because I'm a fixer. And when I would ask, oftentimes it'd be like, well, you're doing this and you're this. It's like, I didn't do anything. I'm asking because I feel this. I know I didn't do anything. And it's like, now I go into defensiveness. Let me logically lay out for you how this didn't happen and how you're mistaken and how I'm going to negate your emotions and lay it out with fact to show you how right I am, that I'm not at fault. And where did that come from for me? Well, that was my relationship with my father, who was a very hmm, uh, traditionalist man of that time frame, who was very, led by aggression and by being right, and that was his place of being right. And if you can prove that you're right, then that's for me became safety. So I bring that into relationship, right? Like during, as long as I'm right, I'm safe. I don't consciously think that. It's the subconscious that takes over. The subconscious that drives our show, as you know very well. We think it's our conscious mind that's driving our reality, but it's our subconscious that dictates. Besides the showing 90 to 95% of all our functioning is driven by our subconscious mind. So my wounding from my child, about how I was trained, how I was domesticated as a child, was to be right meant to be safe. So I take this obviously into my current relationship. And so my wife, when I'm being the hero, when I'm being the good soldier, when I'm being like, I'm going to take care and help you, my wife, I see something's wrong with you. Let me help you by fixing it. Then she says, well, because this is happening, it's like, oh no, now I'm the perpetrator. So I fall back into my old defensive. Let me show you how I'm right. So that played out for us for a decade, almost a decade, 7 to 10 years of that, because it's a long process. I don't think men understand. I don't think women understand that. Our culture shuns away from that. We don't talk about it. So we're trying to bring, not even trying, we're bringing light to that process of this process, that it's not like, a woman's monthly cycle where, there's a, 4 or 5 day period where it's like, okay, this is going to be increased emotions here. And then we're going to go back to whatever the normal person is there. We don't talk about that either. But at least we know that oftentimes, if your partner has a pretty strong cycle, we know that she's going to be emotional through that period, and we learn to kind of walk on eggshells a little bit and direct in different ways. So it's a different thing when it happens for weeks, months, years, and you start to believe that that's the new normal, that that's where the rest of your life is going. I start to think that. And it was very difficult again because in my mind, I was the same person. I hadn't changed. The truth of that is I was changing because I was in my late 30s at that time frame. So I would have been edging into my own andropause. So, you know, we don't know about menopause. We surely don't know about andropause. I know you said you've had a couple men on here talking about the andropause for more the physical, testosterone driven sexual drive, the what happens to our physical body, the mental fog, those kind of things that happen, maybe not as much drive. But I'm looking at it through a whole different lens of what's the opportunity here for men to shift? What I say is I'm the same man at 50. I'm now almost 60. I'll be 59 this year. If I'm the same man at, let's say, 50 that I was at 25, that means there's 25 years of no growth that's happened there, 25 years of no advancing, 25 years of staying stagnant. And not only is that a disservice to myself, but it's also a disservice to all of my relationships and to humanity and to spirit, what I'm here to gift to the world. If I'm still playing in the same realm, in the same thought process, in the same emotional maturity, in the same um, growth maturity as I was at 25, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. I want to bring you back to what you said a little bit earlier in your story of you said the prince, or the boy had to die so the king or the man could be born. And I'm curious in your story, like what are some things did you have to leave behind, or shed, right, that were no longer serving you as you entered this, andropause next phase, elder phase, if you want to call it that, of life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't say that the boy had to die. So that's a little bit different story. I don't think, in my belief, I'm much more of a Ken Wilber kind of, I like what Ken says, to transcend and include. Because as soon as we try to kill the boy, the subconscious gets to the play there, and because the subconscious is about safety, the subconscious is about protecting that child with it. That's what it does so well. It has done so well. That's the whole setup of our first 7 years of life, or from 2 to 7 or about, is protecting that theta brainwave state of creating our reality to help us navigate the world. So for me, it's transcending and include. I want the boy to be in there still. I want some of those princely elements in there still, but it's time to advance, to grow, to transcend that and include that. So for me, I wish, Mark, I could say that I did a good job of transcending and including. I wish I could say that I recognized inside myself that I was being triggered and that I had my own growth opportunity. I didn't. I stayed in my own wallowing pity. This is being done to me. I'm being attacked. I'm trying to be the good guy still. I'm still the good guy. And I am, and I was. And the reason why I'm doing this course, the true reason why I'm doing this course, is because I believe the old adage that we teach what we most need to learn. So I am learning, even though I'm a decade past it with my wife, the past the menopause phase, I'm learning to incorporate and integrate that with inside myself. My wife and I are healing through the wounds that we created because we didn't have somebody to guide us through that. I can see on the other side, I understand on the other side with the deep men's work I've done, with the deep inner work I've done, with the deep shadow work that I've done, with living enough life and having enough time as a father. As you mentioned, I'm a father of 5 boys. I've got um, 2 adopted sons from my wife's first marriage, my son from my first marriage, our son from both of us coming together, and an adopted son. So there is great wisdom that has come by being a father and observing this and growing through that process. There's a great growing within inside myself that has occurred because I've been willing to do the work and step in, because I've challenged myself on my own parts and grown that within inside myself. I've looked at my own wounding and not shied away from it. I've invited in the shadows to bring them into the light. And because of that, I moved through and I could see where, had I had the gift that I'm offering to men to find the king's return, to come from that, some of those more princely behaviors and those 4 domains of the Jungian archetype we typically deal with, even though Jung had, I think, 12 different archetypes, but we tend to go with the king, warrior, magician, lover in that. It's a great framework to play with. Lots of men's groups operate in that. Obviously, the books around that. It's a great container that many men can go, okay, I understand where I am in each of those 4 dimensions. So the process of understanding that and growing into it has allowed me to look at this work and go, where we were talking about moving from the juvenile state, the prince state, to the king, and then even from there to the elder, because there's a very big difference between the king and the elder, in my belief. We have very different responsibility as a king who's in charge of the kingdom than the elder who holds the wisdom, whose body may not function the same way, who may not be able to, I'm not sure we can say this on air, you can clip this out, either fuck it or kill it, right? That's not the job of the elder. The job of the elder is to have gathered enough wisdom, not knowledge, but wisdom, which is applied knowledge, obviously, and lived knowledge, to be able to be the guide for the younger men, for the kingdom, if you will. And so, in my belief, when we do this right, we grow from the prince to the king to the elder that has the secrets to the kingdom. He is the richest resource of the kingdom. He may not be able to do the most work. He may not be able to move at all, hardly. It's not about what you can do physically. It's what you offer up from the soul, from the core, from the guidance of a true, mature, integrated, wholly anchored, grounded man. So for me, to get to your question of moving from that prince to the king and from the king to the elder is about my own process of going, I'm almost 60 now. I'm in that place of going, I'm now showing up in men's groups where I'm not the youngest anymore. I'm now showing up in men's groups where the younger men are leaning to me in a different way. And I'm shifting, going, got it. I'm in a different role. I'm no longer that young man who's got the fire, super hot fire in the belly driving us. I'm the more grounded, mature king going, all right, what does the kingdom need of me? And the kingdom needs right now for me, Mark, is I'm not in that elder place. I'm not there. I'm really aware of that. But what the kingdom needs for me is to give back to the younger men and help grow them into the king's self, to help them navigate these challenging times, whether they're in a relationship or not, they're in relationship with themselves. So can you move through from that princely behavior into the king position, which means really owning responsibility for everything in the kingdom. And that is not a prince's place. The prince avoids responsibility. The prince plays the victim. The prince dances on the outside of society. I said there's a really big difference between, we've got this beautiful metaphor out there right now, Prince Harry and Prince William. Prince Harry, because he's not the person who's going to become king eventually. Prince Harry can go out there and play. He can jump and hang out in the United States. He can denounce his rights and his responsibilities to the throne. He can go out there and be the playboy and have the great life and do what he wants to because he's still a prince. Prince William has had to take that prince role and move into the king position and go, I don't have a luxury of doing this. I've got a responsibility, even though it's not fully on my shoulders yet, it's on my shoulders. I have people are watching me all the time in a different lens than they're watching Prince Harry. So Prince William is prince only in title. He is fully standing in king as often as much as possible because he feels the weight and responsibility of the kingdom on his shoulders. And it's interesting, Mark, because for me, there's a part of me that runs from this. Like, I don't want that kind of responsibility. I want to have the freedom because one of the key tenets as men is freedom. We want this great freedom to be able to go, hey, I want to do this, but I want the freedom to go over here and do that. I don't want all that responsibility that holds me down here. Give me all the freedom to be able to play in life and do all these things. And it wasn't until I understood at a deeper level what it truly means to be a king and to hold that responsibility, to claim responsibility for everything. And its weird juxtaposition and weird play that seems like it doesn't make sense is that claiming that responsibility, really owning it, gives you ultimate freedom.
Oh, I just want to hear more on that because I think, for me, right, being a younger man, getting married was that first identity shift, right? Being like, okay, now there's one other person, you know? I'm not just like a solo lone wolf. I have to consider another person. And, we have a kid on the way. So it'll be like, okay, now I got to consider the family. But when I hear your story, it sounds like you have a large, beautiful family. You said you're a grandfather. You run these communities, these men's communities, right? It's like the circle keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I like how you say that that's the kingdom, right? It's more than just you. And at some point, your individual identity becomes that of the kingdom. And I want to hear about that because I see a lot of men struggle with that passing of the torch. When they become the patriarch or they become the leader or they become, they're not a kid anymore, right? Often when their parents die, like you mentioned, right? Like when their parents die, and you're like, oh shit, I'm the parent for now. Like I'm 100% definitely an adult. I can no longer pretend like I'm not an adult. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. So yeah, if you could just speak more on that identity shift of really seeing things as a group and a collective rather than an individual.
Yeah, I love that, Mark. That's a really good question. And that will help kind of flesh out a bit of what I'm talking about, the responsibility of the kingdom and the freedom that comes with that. So what I also did mention, I'm also a great grandfather. So I've got two great grandchildren, and I'm only 59. So it's a people ask how that. There's a whole story behind that I won't go into. But so you're right. I often talk about what you're just described there is that when you're by yourself, there's some and you're the lone wolf. Although we know that the lone wolf doesn't really exist in nature, it's a misnomer. Then I think that has unfortunately infected. I'll use that word infected men in a really terribly disempowering way. We are pack animals by nature. We are tribe by nature. By in our biology, we're tribal beings. I mean, what's the number one issue in our country right now is the sense of loneliness, the sense of being alone. Even though we're more connected than we've ever been, we're less connected than we've ever been because we're wrapped into here instead of our hearts connecting and instead of our stories sharing. So part of again the king's return here. I'll jump back into there. Part of the king's return is really about finding tribe. Is about finding kindred conversations where men who are struggling, going through the process of their own andropause and their partner's menopause, how they just don't know how to navigate is like, you need tribe to navigate. You need somebody like me to go, yup, I got you. I understand because I've been there. I stumbled through it and tripped. I didn't have somebody to help guide me. Let me give you a pathway to show you how you can do this in a better way that hopefully holds together your relationship, your foundation, and grows you through that instead of being the perpetual victim and then jumping out going, oh, I don't like this person. I'm my child, my wounded prince needs to go back to when I was 25 or 30 and go and get a 30-year-old woman and not realizing that you're playing that over again in 10 years because she's also going to move into the menopause state. So let's address this as men where we are with your current partner when it's possible. Not all relationships can stay together, but when they can be, you hold together this concentric circles we're going to talk about. You hold together the relationship that you have with your partner. You hold together, if you've got children, that relationship that you have with your children. Because I've been through that. Divorce is tough. Breaking apart your family is soul tearing if you're really playing at it as a father. It's difficult and the best of times. Dividing up relationships of family members and on both parts of your partner's family and your family and the friends that you share together. How do you have so it's a part of this is the gift back to us as men and into the relationship of the possibility of holding that container together when we do it in a sacred way and we learn how to navigate and grow through andropause and menopause and hold those relationships and grow. That's one of the gifts I'm offering here. So yes, we are the lone wolf that doesn't exist. We have the freedom to do anything we want to. when we come into partnership with a partner, we abdicate part of that strength, part of that freedom for, hopefully, if you see it as such, you're giving up something to get something greater. If you don't see that, if you go, oh, I can't do the same things I used to be able to do because my partner wants me to X, Y, or Z, or my partner's needs are this, and I'm responsible. I feel responsible, obligated to that, instead of going, I get to expand my reach and my relationship by giving up some of my freedom, but getting something else much larger over here. When you become a father, and it sounds like, Mark, you're on your way with that. Congratulations. Welcome almost to that sacred brotherhood of fatherhood. I've got money constraints. I got responsibilities. I can't travel as much. All those things that feel like constraints, and they are. If you can switch that, and this is what I did. This is what, if I've done anything well in my life, it is making fatherhood the sacred work that I did for that 25-year period, make it the core of who I was. So I didn't base my choice of jobs on what made me more money or where I was able to advance. I based jobs and situations on how it fit in with the structure of my fathering. And it changed everything for me. It changed absolutely everything because of the relationship that I had with my children and with the mentoring by demonstrating by who I show up in the world of who I am for my older sons, for my two older sons who are now 44 and 40, almost 43. They come back with me frequently because they were adults, but they were 17 and 19 when I came into my wife's life. But they say, it has been so important for them to have observed me as a father to now they have their own families and for them to go, okay. And they come to me often and they say, how do you navigate this? What it's like, that's a great question. So I'm able to mentor them that. So it can feel like you're giving up, which you are if you're looking at it through a prince lens, or you can go, oh my God, my kingdom, the service, because a king is in service to the king. That's the key. That's the key right there. If it's all about me and what I can get, you're going to roll around in the circle of what you've lost, of how you haven't done. When you understand the king is in service to the kingdom, and because he's in service to the kingdom, because he's able to do that, he then reaps what he's planted. He reaps what he's in service to. Unfortunately, we see so many fathers who abandon that, so many people in partnership who chase the job, which again, I'm not going to make judgment around that. My choice was to do it this way. But what ends up happening in midlife, oftentimes for those men, they've got the job, they've got the millions of dollars, they've got all the accolades, and there's this giant hole because the stuff, the job, the titles don't fill that deeper hole of really truly what is being in service to a bigger thing. For me, it is right now, it has been my my partner, my wife, my family, my my community of men that I've worked in and other community partners that are outside of men that I've chosen to serve. And what's calling forth now is a bigger service to humanity. And in this is the King's Return. It's one way. So my wife is creating, we're wrapping up an app that we're creating to serve women in menopause because it's a journey. It's a long journey. It's called Sacred Menopause, and we're launching it also toward the beginning of September timeframe. So, and then we're going to be doing classes in person for couples, where doing men's work on one side, women's work on the other side, and come together in a crucible and talk about where we're coming together and give some tools and support for helping couples move through this. So it's interesting. We've taken this thing that has been, these small concentric circles that felt very kind of isolated and had no real understanding of where I was leading. And now it's leading me into like, oh, there's bigger work to be in service to. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for human beings because it's so needed. I'm doing it to serve humanity with that and to give back in a bigger way. And what's beautiful about this is I've known since I met my wife that we're supposed to be doing work together. We haven't found that real ability to do that. It's like, oh my God, this is the perfect place where we can use our own wounding, our own process that we went through and had nobody to guide us in. And we could come together and help provide the pathway for others to move down. And it's rich and it's rewarding and we're both super excited and also super nervous because, as I mentioned, we've got still our own wounds because we didn't do it in a way that we're laying out here. So we're fascinating bringing up as we're developing this, we're getting in our own fights again and going, that's the wound. Now, where am I growing through on this process that I'm leading other men through? So it's quite fascinating and intriguing and disruptive and really, truly growth oriented and part of me claiming my full kingdom going, yep, that's my responsibility to own that and to grow through so that I can also guide through in a more complete whole way. So long answer to a question, but it's a great question about this concentric rings and this freedom of men and what this means to really own the ultimate freedom, which is going into service, giving, expanding your responsibility, which leads to more freedom and more connection and more feeding back to you. And I promise you, Mark, and anybody else who is kind of approaching that midlife stage, because it will ring true to most of you. In fact, it should ring true to all of you, unless you really have done this work, is that we've been taught that it's about getting the stuff and it's about creating the big empires and me, that's, well, that's the American dream of, let me show you how much money I have. Let me show you my mansions. We're not doing the work of, God, let me show you what a real man does. Let me show you what a mature king does. Let me show you then what happens after that mature king moves into integrating more and more and becomes the grounded elder that anchors in the entire community, anchors in a large field and gives back in service, gives back in service. What does that look like? The men who haven't gotten that, who are approaching midlife, who are trying to fill those that inner hole, that inner longing with stuff. Again, as I've mentioned, there will come a time where you realize you can't fill that hole. You can't put enough stuff in there to fill that hole because you're filling it with the wrong stuff. And when you recognize that it is in the service, then that is the freedom. You don't have to then pursue the stuff. You don't have to pursue somebody, you know, caring about what you've got letters behind your name or who you know or what you've done, but who you are is the freedom. The freedom to serve is the great wealth that we have missed and we don't even know about. That's right there before us. And that is the freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'll go a step further when I tell my guys the way that I'm looking at it with, my wife being pregnant is like, it's also meaning. I think we're sold, like you're saying, this grand American vision. I know my generation, the millennials, were often sold these like massive meanings, right? Your meaning has to be to cure cancer or save the rainforest, right? Or go to the moon, right? We had these like crazy things. We were told we could do whatever we wanted, it's good. It came from a place of love, but it set a lot of us up for these really like, we need to be great men and women in order to fulfill those, the visions. But as I read more of this stuff, I talk to more people like yourself. It's like meaning is commitment. Meaning is the commitment you make to other people, your family, probably first and foremost, right? But that's where the meaning comes from. It can be small, but it can also be really deep, and I think that's a really important message. That's what I really hear you saying is like, being a good dad, like that's a good life, right? Like that's a good life. That's all it has to be.
It's not a good life. It's a fantastic life. And Vishen Lakhiani, who is a founder of Mind Valley, if you're familiar with him, he tells this interesting story. He just put this out here, I'm going to say maybe a month ago. That's a story. I'll paraphrase it. That this gentleman who is a mover and shaker in the men's movement 30 years ago, maybe, he was coming up to he was at this Hollywood party, and he was going to meet with this actress, and they were going to have this great conversation about stuff. And on his way, showed up this event, this party. He was walking across, he and this actress met eyes and just walking across. And in between there, this gentleman stopped him and said, "Thank you so much, Doctor," whatever his name was, for doing this work around men and about parenting and fatherhood. With my first child, I was so busy with work and stuff that I feel like I just wasn't there for my child, and I feel like I missed out on this. I've got this younger child here, and I want your work, and what you did for me made me be a father who wants to be present. And so I'm stepping away from the work so that I can be a parent. And the gentleman says, "What's your name?" He's like, "Oh, my name's John." It's like, "Okay, so John, a couple things I want to ask you. Is your wife in support of you stepping away from the work where you were making income?" And he smiles like, "Yeah, she's in support of this." It's like, and he says, "Do you have enough financial wherewithal to be able to now?" Because it says she can say she's okay with this now, but she may not be as life moves on and you're there for your kid and stuff. She says, "No, I've got enough. I'm okay in that area." And he said they sat there and talked. This guy was so like anchored in it, like grounded. It's like, "I need to talk with you and let you know how important this was." He's like, I sat down and gave this guy my full attention because it was so important to him that I made it more important to me than my meeting with this person over here. And so eventually after an hour, this actress comes over and she says to this guy, "Oh, so I see you talking to John Lennon here. And you guys know each other." It's like, the guy's like, "Oh my God, I had no idea there was a John Lennon."
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
John Lennon, who, if you think of a person who has all the success in the world and all the money and all the ability to change, he said his most important thing that he ever did was in that time frame where he was stepped away from all the fame and all the stuff and and became a father and became really present to that. So getting back to your story of being a millennial and thinking that you have to make this big change out here, what if the big work is one person? What if the big work is a gift of being in a deep relationship and being the best father that you can be? That has been my work. That has been my work and has made all the difference. There are times in my mental constructs, like, yep, I've got, I was an Air Force officer. I've got the MBA. I've got, like 6 degrees. I could have created that empire out there and made lots and lots. In fact, my dad was like, "Why are you only doing this?" It's like, "You just don't get it, Dad. You don't get it." In this, in that chapter of my life that was about nurturing, growing, being present to my sons and to my wife, it healed her. It healed my wife's wounds of past father. She always wanted to parent with somebody who loved and was there for the kids as much as what she was. So I was able to help heal her wounds around that. I was able to help heal my own wounds around myself with my father because I made it, the journey is like, I'm going to do this different. I broke that chain of the epigenetic passing down from generation to generation, which typically happens when we pass down the wounds. We see ourselves oftentimes being our fathers or our mothers coming out of our mouths, how we act. I was able to somehow break those chains and show up in a different way and create a new pattern for my younger sons to step into. So they are different men than than what I was, than what my father was, and what my grandfather was, because I was able to break the chains of abuse and stoicism. I tell a story that one of the most poignant stories in my life. I'll share this, Mark, because it's coming up for me. Most poignant stories that kind of drove most of the rest of my life was when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I was sitting in my living room. I was rocking, and my dad came up to me, as he did pretty much every night, and said, "Good night, son. I love you." And at this time, the core being of myself said, "No, you don't. You don't love me." And I said it with an emphatic statement of core knowing, like my soul knew that my father did not understand love. And he had his own reasons for that, his own wounding, his own childhood upbringing, their own, stuff that creates us, right? That molds us, that shapes us, that forms us. And I said, "No, you don't." And that was the last time he said he loved me for until I said it back to him 30 some years later. And in fact, he let that go the last 15 years of his life. He couldn't tell me he loved me. And and it broke my heart for him not to be able to do that. But I knew that he didn't understand what love was. He really didn't understand. He could say the words, but there wasn't the true intent and understanding of what that meant behind it. There wasn't the investment of soul into that I knew weirdly at 6 years old was truth for me. And so I bring that healing into my own children because I broke that pattern that then could grow. Is that going to make a difference? Mark, it may ripple out in this world in ways I have no idea will last long past me. That I've got two young sons who have that, and my older sons who have witnessed me being a father in that way, who are teaching their sons and daughters differently because of my example. Is that good work? Oh my God, is that work that I can go on my deathbed, did I do my good work in the world? Absolutely.
So yeah, how can guys get started or start to tap into that way of being, right? Because what I'm hearing you talking about, right, is like the shift from the physical and the material to the more emotional and the spiritual, which I think really is the hallmark of growing up, of moving to that second half of life. And I think as men, yeah, we're focused on physical, like trying, be fit, run the marathon, lift the heavy weights, whatever it is, and the material, right, make money, accrue stuff, buy the mansions, like you're saying. But this whole other world of emotional and spiritual, for our listeners that are feeling inspired by this conversation, where can they begin? Where can they begin to really develop these whole different realms? And it is a different realm. I mean, it's a totally different game once you go beyond just the physical world, you know?
Yeah, and I think for me, if I look through the cycles of men's lives, and we do both my wife and I work off of wheels of 13 cycles that men and women go through, and there's different stages. And really fascinatingly, in in our older years, the stage that you're in, directly across from there is a pattern that reflects what's going on in your older. And if you've got wounds from the past that you didn't move through that stage in a healthy, whatever healthy means, way, then there's opportunity in that across that line to do the work to mature into that. I think some of the best places to do that, Mark, are doing the work that you have through your company, right? So we know we've got some of these obstacles, challenges, shadow parts. Can you step into those? Can you acknowledge instead of trying to do, man, I did it myself. I tried to do my own shadow work by myself. It was fascinating because I've done so much spiritual work. It's like, all right, I know that the spirit came and said, for me to be able to move into the deepest level of my next phase, and this is like 6 or 7 years ago, for me to be able to move into the next phase, to really be present and be fully anchored and be the guy that the world needs for me to be, I need to go into the shadow part and excavate that and heal some of those. It's like, cool. I'm not the wolf guy. I'll go do that myself. So I'm going in, doing, using all the spiritual tools and all the, academic mental tools. Like I said, I spent the last 60 years working at a uniform. Maybe I didn't say that. Spent the last 16 years as faculty at Colorado State University. So I'm an academician. I've got my MBA. I'm the Air Force officer. I'm all these things like I can do this. I'm that lone wolf who can really do it by himself. I'm watching myself and going, damn it, I can't. my subconscious has done such a good job of creating the walls and the floor. It was a metal floor. It was floor I couldn't get through and I couldn't get around. It's like, oh, I need somebody to guide me around that and through that. So it's important for men when they get mature enough, when they're tired of trying to do it all by themselves, of finding number one tribe of some kind, find other men. I like the principle of one third. When you get old enough, the principle of one third is that you should be mentoring men or others who are younger than you, don't have as much skill as you. One third of your time should be spent in the mentoring that. One third of your time should be spent in peers where you're growing and understanding where you're all moving through together. And one third of your time should be in relationship with men or women or others who are, who have experience beyond yours that can guide you and grow you. So find those mentors, find those places where people can help grow you that way. Could be through men's group. I love the stuff that like the group that we were at, they were talking about men's relations, but certainly Mankind Project has a lot of good work. Every Man, Sacred Sons that Vince Chafin, that was one of your guests here a while back, talked about. That's typically for a little bit younger group, for late 20s through the 30s with that. Get into this work and find that we're more tribe, and you'll find fellow men who are singing the same soul song that you are, who are going through the same things, because oftentimes being the lone wolf makes you feel like, what? You're alone. And you think everybody else has it figured out. And that if you show weakness by saying, I don't understand this, that you'll have your man card pulled or something along those lines. And we forget, because we don't understand, that we come from tribe. We come from tribe. That is in our DNA and our cellular level, is men connecting in with men, men having over men to nurture, guide, and to go, okay, you've got this really princely, energetic role that is, again, the kill it or fuck it energy. Let me help contain this so you don't destroy everything around you. Let me give it a proper outlet. And as men mature into fathers, let me guide you through what it means to be a good, strong father, what it means to be a responsible, grounded father, what it means to do this in a way that you can be, that you can feel good about it and know that you did your best. Know that you're going to mess your kids up anyway, but you did it with great love and great compassion and great intent on doing the best that you can. And joining groups, being part of a men's group, will help ground you and give you tools and let you know that you're not alone. It also will help grow you, because if you're in a good group that calls you out on your BS, that's what you want. You want friends, you want mentors and guides who don't just tell you you're doing a great job. And yeah, they don't understand that this is where, in this men's work I'm doing with the King's Return, and especially around menopause, you'll have 1 million men out there, 10 million men telling you, yeah, it's all on your wife. You haven't changed. She's changed. She's the problem, not you. Ditch her and get somebody. She's a broken. I had several of my men's friends talk about their wife going crazy. And to some degree, there is that thing, because the hormones running through the body are so on fire that she can't contain herself sometimes. It just blows out. It's kind of, and the analogy I use is young men coming into puberty, where it's like they fight, they don't even know what happened. They do, and then they think. That's why we have the insurance until you're 25 is like the highest ranges for those young people, and the very old also, but the young people, especially young men, because we're so ungrounded, you can't contain the fire that's in the belly that comes up, and it's like, I want to fight it. I want to just do it. All this crazy thing happened. I didn't think so. So what are you thinking about? It's like, you're not thinking. That prefrontal cortex hasn't developed fully yet. So you're not thinking. It's the energy, it's the chemicals that's pushing us into things that at a later stage of life you go, what the hell was I thinking? What was I doing? Oh my God, the things I did, looking back at my life, what I did as a young man, it's like, I should have died not dozens, but hundreds of times of things I did. It's like, oh my God. Which is why oftentimes as fathers, we want to go like, don't do this. Oh my God, let me contain you because you're going to kill yourself. That's part of that maturation of that young man, is to explore, is to do something different than what the father was. and who the Father is and what the Father contains. And we learn through those. So I think men, whether it's young men or old men, older men need to find containers of other men to interact with. They need to be willing to take the journey of being wrong, of needing help, of asking for help. So it's this place again of finding this relationship with somebody to hold you accountable in the best of ways, in the absolute best of ways, to move you in from that stage of the juvenile prince into the king that you are meant to be in service to your kingdom. And there is nothing more rewarding than when you step into that and fill that role. Again, that responsible, taking on that responsibility, owning that responsibility, feeling the weight of the crown, because it helps keep you grounded and anchored and remembering. That's why the king, they put the crown up. It's not the crown, only the crown. For me, it's metaphorically when the cloak comes on, when the cape comes on, it's like it holds. So there's a holding of the head, which is the crown, which for men, where we think through, it's like the weight is not to let your mind be in charge, but to let your whole. And so when I talk about the Integral Man Institute, the integral part is, can you be whole in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies? So you can create this container of self and do the work in all four dimensions there to bring yourself fully present to those in your kingdom. And that's a powerful place to be. And that starts with doing the work. That starts with stepping in and asking for help. That starts with getting involved in groups, going through the therapy, if you need that, that Mark and your team offer there, which is incredibly powerful and needed. And I love what you're doing. I love how you're doing it, Mark, that it's anchored in the science and also in the heart, right? That's power. Those are oftentimes not associated together, And and I know you, at least in the time we spent together at the men's conference and also through here and looking up and reviewing some of the work that you do, that it's really about accountability. And it's really about, the good work, the really deep, good work that's there for us. So those are some of the ways that we can, as men, move ourselves forward and help each other and create a culture and a society and a world that is led and held by true elders, not because you have minutes. I hate the process of people being eldered over a weekend where they go through a 2-hour rite of passage and now they're elders and they go, I have no idea. They're the same person on one side as they are on the other. That's not a true elder. It's not a true rite of passage. A true rite of passage takes years of growth, of inner work, of doing the work, of showing up, of doing what I'm doing, which is giving back to younger men, or giving back to people in a relationship, giving back to fathers, because I've got a whole repository of information that I can help fathers with. How do I do that? How do I show up? And that then grows me. That then grows me further until finally there is the phase of like, an energetic shift has happened here, just like I had when I went in the last 6 or 7 years, when I went from being the man who was teaching and leading men's courses as I'll say almost in a princely way of going, oh, I've now shifted into mentor, coach, guide in a really different, more mature stance where younger men are looking up to me as opposed to me guiding older men or peers. The same shift should happen for a true elder, where you go from where I am now as this king, anchored, grounded king, to growing, healing, doing more work, sharing more with my kingdom, expanding that kingdom, to all of a sudden there will be a place where like, oh, now I felt the shift. This is what's being asked of me in a different way than the powerful king that I am now. There's a softer, powerful, wise elder that I've seen. I've seen it in my meditations. I've seen that man. It almost brings me to tears about knowing who that version of Mark is. I can see it, feel it. I can touch, I can viscerally feel it. My body's like, that's what I'm growing into. That's who I am. I see the future version of myself. It's my responsibility to put things in alignment that make that a reality.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I really enjoyed this episode. I'm curious if people want to learn from you. You've mentioned, the course coming up. You mentioned your wealth of content online. But if people want to find more about you and your work, where can they look?
Yeah, the best place right now is probably just my website, markplatten.com or Mark J. Platten. It's an interesting thing from my military days, that middle initial, and it seems to energetically the whole place. So either way will take you to my website. I'm in the process of updating a few things in there. But I'll put some links in there that will direct you primarily for those of you who are interested in the course, The King's Return. Like I said, I'm going to be starting that on at the beginning of September, and looking for men who wanting to do the work. This is not, I'm not playing here, and I've done enough work and enough teaching in the academic realm and so forth that I know what I have to offer. That this is about, come here to do the work, come here to save the relationship, come here to grow in your own king self. So that stuff will be fun, mostly on my website, markjplatten.com or markplatten.com.
Great. Yeah. And listeners, all that stuff will be in the show notes. So you'll be able to click those links to go direct to his website. All of our stuff is at menstherapy.online. We got individual, we got groups, we got couples. It's a great place to start if you're interested in some of this work. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Mark. It's like you can't do it alone. You got to do it in community. You got to do it with men that are strong, that can hold you accountable, and that can cut through the noise, right? Guys that have been there and that know it. And Mark, I know you're one of those men that can really see the blind spots and help you see and integrate your shadow. So, Mark, thank you again for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, my friend. Thank you for the honor of being here with you, Mark. And thanks for the good work you're doing. That's a rarity in this world for men to be doing men's work. We need more of you. So thank you.
And we need as much of us out there as possible. And listeners,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.